Good morning, Marketing 450 students. I apologize for having to cancel class. I'm kind of down and out with some serious flu bug-like symptoms here. So I apologize for not getting the CX performance stuff done. I've just been feeling so bad, but I finally got to it. I wanted to give you a quick common mistakes. I just got done kind of coming up with the placements, and here are some of the common mistakes. So the first one is the numbers have to be correct. In this competition, we probably had more wrong answers than all the other competitions combined. Why is that? Well, for starters, it was because we had to kind of take data from JASP and add and subtract those numbers, come up with divide, the performance ratios, and just people made mistakes, right? So whenever we're manipulating data like this, where we've got to do further algorithms or mathematics with the data, we got to be careful. In fact, more than just being careful, we have to double check. We should have somebody on our team running the same analysis and double checking the numbers to make sure we did it correctly. There were a couple teams that are really, really good teams. There's a team in the 11 o'clock class. I was going to say this was one of the best presentations I've ever seen on this. They had wrong answers. They're out. There's a team that was in the lead in the 9:30 class. They made mistakes in the numbers. And so my bottom line is you have to get the numbers correct, and I can't have any wiggle room on that at all, because if the numbers are wrong, we tell the people to do the wrong things. So this one too, we kind of came back to graphing mistakes. And I know this was a hard competition, but we've got to make sure that we get the graphing mistakes limited, right? So the first one, we have inconsistent scales. So again, if we're going to be talking about performance and we have our scales, from 0 to 10, they should all be 0 to 10. Now, I would have gone 5 to 10 or 6 to 10 or 4 to 10 on those satisfaction scales, but they need to be consistent. Even when we're doing performance ratios, if we're showing half of the group, from negative point or zero point 0.5 to 1.5, great, but that scale should be consistent. And some really good teams made that mistake where they would consistent scales. There also has to be some sorting and putting the data in some order. There were lots of scales. I'm like, I can't find an order to this data, and it makes it incredibly hard if there's not logical order. Some orders are better than others, right? So in this one, whether it's but the bottom line, it has to be some order. Data labels. I was a little bit lenient on data labels because I'm thinking that some of the teams thought that there are too many attributes, so they shouldn't put the data labels. But in general, I think it probably was a good idea to put data labels on these. It makes it so much more difficult to find out what these different scores are if there's no data labels, especially if the graph is kind of smaller than it should be. And remember, the graphs are like the Mona Lisa here. We want those to be front and center. So let that be the star of the page. In other words, don't shrink your graph so that it fits on a beautiful Canva layout. Have that graph be the whole screen. Okay. And then finally, use color wisely, right? If something's we're not doing well, that should be red. If we're doing well, it could be green or blue. If it's kind of middling, it could be the gray. But use some logic to our color, right? For example, in the NPS, Hungry Howie's is yellow, and Domino's could be blue, and Papa John's could be. I think they're use those colors that they give us, right? Like their brand colors. That works too. So decimal places. So decimal places have been maybe one of the biggest troubling areas to teams. No doubt, we want to be consistent in our decimal places. I think this type of data for what we're working is two decimal places, at least with the performance attribute ratings and performance ratios. Two decimal places are generally like the accepted principles on this. No decimal places or one decimal place would be fine on the NPS scores. But again, follow my lead in the presentation. I give you those presentations so you can follow it. Look at how many decimal places. Pay attention to those little details. So words, be careful with the words we're using. This was about performance, not importance. There were some presentations that got dinged pretty heavily because it's not about improvement. It's not about preference. It's not about importance. This was about performance. How are we doing with customers, right? And all of the lingo should really be in there. There's a lot of mistakes in this area, and we're throwing terms around loosely. I would say too, another one too is that I'm okay with you guys copying slides from previous presentations, but make sure that things match up. So there were teams that were saying the objectives were max diff importance, and then they show me performance, right? So we need to make sure, like for example, that if we borrow from a previous presentation, great, I'm okay with that. It just makes sure that it works. And then did you follow the plan, right? So I go through and show you how to do a CX performance analysis, and did you follow that, right? Sometimes I wonder if teams are following that, like, and it's okay to be different too. Like I want to give you that. Like I don't think there's only one right way to do it, but what I will say is my way is a right way, and it's safer like that. So if you deviate from what I do in the presentation, great. Just make sure you do it well. And some teams were deviating and not doing it well. So and then comparing and following that plan, I compared to outside benchmarks of NPS. Did you? So I was looking to see come up with something, right? When we look at outside benchmarks, there's a couple of rules of thumb here, and I got a couple calls on this, so I want to kind of go a little bit more into it. Comparing ourselves to outside benchmarks, I would compare us to the best in the world, but then I would try to find really relevant benchmarks like Pizza Hut. There's one out there for Pizza Hut and a national Domino's chain, I think, too. So do the best in the world, but also do what's relevant for our industry. And it could have been national pizza places. It could have been fast food. Give me something that's close. And then finally, be careful when you use a graphic. There are graphics that appeared in presentations that depict they were funny and cute with the NPS graphic. Make sure it's correct. It is an 11-point scale that goes from 0 to 10, and people make mistakes with that all the time. So there's a graphic that somebody used and it's really nice and it's wrong. So make sure that if you're going to use a graphic, make sure it's correct graphic. So all right, hey, listen, I appreciate all the hard work and effort on this, and I just wanted to make sure that you guys self-assess and you look for ways to improve your performance. Thanks, and have a great weekend.